Hi there. You might have read or heard about Euractiv, our company, more than usual this week. And I just wanted to let you know that Today in the EU stands against all sorts of discrimination and is dedicated to keeping it that way. You can count on it. Today in the EU, what the uprising that toppled Serbia's Prime Minister means for the country's future. In Serbia, protests have been gaining momentum for months. It all started in November when a railway station ceiling collapsed, killing 15 people in a city just 90 minutes away from Belgrade. Now, 2 months later, students are at the forefront of the largest demonstrations Serbia has seen in recent history. So how did we get to this point? And what does the future of the country look like? Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Giada Santana, and this is Today in the EU. What began with students quickly grew. Teachers joined in, and then tens of thousands took the streets of Belgrade. At first, protesters demanded answers. Who is responsible for this deadly collapse? But their demands have soon escalated. Serbians want a new government, one that upholds transparency and the rule of law. Under pressure, Prime Minister Miloš Vučević stepped down, claiming he did so to ease tensions.
Moja poziva odluka da podnesem ostavku na mesto predsjednika Vlade Republike Srbije.
But social turmoil shows no sign of stopping. Protesters want an alternative to the current president of the country, Aleksandar Vučić. To understand how it all started and where the country is headed, our producer Charles Cohen talks to ECFR expert Engjellushe Morina.
So I'm now with Engjellushe Morina, Senior Policy Fellow at ECFR. Engjellushe, hi.
Thanks for inviting me. Hello.
So let's start from the beginning. On the 1st of November, the roof of the Novi Sad railway station, 100 kilometers northwest of Belgrade, collapsed, killing 15 people. How did this happen?
There is a bit of a background to this building. It was initially prematurely opened because they wanted to show off during the electoral campaign. When I say they, this is the ruling party, SNS. Mm-hmm. They were going through an electoral campaign and they wanted to show off things that they have been doing. And then it was closed and reconstructed again. Mm-hmm. So apparently the reconstruction was made by a Chinese company with a very dodgy procurement procedures, not transparent. All this as part of this advertised railway line that would take people to Budapest. And there was a bit of a show by Vučić and Orban on PRing on this a couple of years ago. And they were sitting on the train and waving to imaginary people and so on and so forth. And then, obviously it was done so badly that 15 people, unfortunately, got killed when the roof collapsed all of a sudden. And some, there's some videos that are terrible. Some people were just sitting there and having coffee.
Yes, footage is quite shocking, and the station had just reopened after renovations. In fact, the Higher Public Prosecutor's Office from Belgrade is suggesting that there is evidence of economic crime, which is a fancy umbrella term that covers several types of felony, including, corruption or money laundering.
Most probably. I didn't look very deeply into this, but the main demands of the protesters are exactly these. They want rule of law, they want accountability, they want transparency, they want good governance. Mm-hmm. So, I wouldn't be surprised that there are so many things behind this case, this particular case, but other cases of construction going badly. Because, if we look into the European Commission report for Serbia of 2024, this is in particularly emphasized the way that the constructions are done and managed and the way that the procurement is managed, the public procurement. And so, I wouldn't be surprised if the prosecutor in Belgrade comes to this conclusion. Right. Because, everything is leading into this direction, all these different documents coming from the EU and different cases in Serbia of mismanagement of funds, of bad governance, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm. And of course, this is a tragic accident, but per se, it might not have triggered the scale of protest. For reference, these are the largest demonstrations since the fall of communism in Serbia. So, what are the underlying reasons behind the Novi Sad accident?
So the protests in Serbia, especially these ones that have been going on for 4 months now, they are not, isolated cases. From 2012, ever since Vučić came to power, Aleksandar Vučić that is, protesters were on and off in the streets of Serbia, particularly Belgrade, but also other cities in Serbia. There were environmental protests. There were really, serious protests in 2023 after the shooting in the school and after another shooting a couple of days ago. I say serious because people were devastated by these two incidents. They were traumatized. So they took to the streets for months and months under the slogan of Serbia against violence. And, the demands then were pretty similar to the ones that we see now. The demands were rule of law, freedom of media, accountability, and also, the ending of the incitement of violence shown in some of the media in Serbia. But this, was met with deaf ears in a way. I mean, there were some court processes and people have been brought to people have been accused, like the parents of this guy, so on and so forth. So that things happened from accountability side. But in general, people were completely dissatisfied because the situation with the rule of law doesn't change drastically, doesn't change substantially.
Yes, and same goes for press freedom, right?
The freedom of media is not improving at all. There is lack of freedom of media. But the way that media is used by the party in power is also irritating all the masses, and the people that we see in the streets are actually on daily basis being attacked by this media. Pro-government tabloids and all sorts of pro-government supported media. They not only incite violence, but they promote these different campaigns against the protesters. They even breach very protection of data laws. They publish different personal data for some of these protesters, and so on and so forth. So this time is really way much bigger, but there is a lot of perseverance. You can see that even from a distance. The protesters are not going to give in to whatever Vučić is offering in different ways by different statements saying, let's sit and talk. There is an open, invitation to the dialogue, the resignation of the Prime Minister.
Yeah, Miloš Vučević.
Yeah, but I think the protesters are quite adamant in their request. They need to see substantial changes. They need to see some seriousness from the side of the party in power, that they really mean it, that they want to talk to the masses that are protesting and they want to address the changes. Otherwise, there's not going to be confidence in protesters that this time he really means it, but that he's going to do the same thing that he does usually. He gets away with it.
Yeah, and would you say that this event in Novi Sad and the subsequent protests acted as a catalyst in Serbia that in turn exposed Vučić's grip on power and his control over the media and the press?
I think so. I think it's quite complex situation. There are many signs that say that there will be a continued instability, if not the crisis deepening. I don't see this crisis being over in the next few days or weeks. The dissatisfaction has mounted from several years ago. So the different elements of the society have been protesting for different causes. The environmentalists because of the lithium, opposition, civil society on one hand. And now the students have come out in the streets, and I don't see this being a protest that could easily go away without having some sort of a real sustainable agreement going on between, I wouldn't say the government in power, because they're not very keen to talk to the government in power. There has to be some confidence building going on here first before they sit and talk. So yes, I think this is a real exposure of what has been going on for many years now in Serbia. Some people are as blatant as such that they say he has been lying to people internally, meaning Vučić, and he has been lying to everyone externally. So I think things like this are bound to come to an end, and I wouldn't be surprised that this is actually the beginning of the end.
And so what would this end look like? I mean, on Tuesday evening, Vučić addressed the country on television and hinted at new elections in the coming weeks.
Miloš je podneo ostavku I sad procedura je sljedeća. Ide se sa konstatacijom u Narodnoj skupštini.
Miloš has resigned and the subsequent procedure is as follows. His resignation must be ratified by the National Assembly. Once it's confirmed, a 30-day timeline will start, during which the necessary procedures for the elections of a new government must occur. If the government is not formed in 30 days, elections are immediately called. But was there any change to be expected from the current state narrative?
This is the tricky part. It's going to be very difficult to see the students be convinced that Vučić really meant it on Tuesday, that he really means he's going to take all these changes, because I think they probably have a lot of question marks. Is he the right person to lead these processes? And I don't think so. I mean, if we look back at many doings in Serbia coming from the party in power led by him, you don't get much confidence that he's the person who will be able to lead these very transparent processes to get to a different state where everyone is happy, or where most people are happy, to deal with the rule of law issues, which are very, very deep, to deal with economic issues, to deal with all these accountability, transparency, freedom of media. I don't think he knows how to talk to the rest of the society if they're not part of SNS or SNS-supported movement.
I want to talk more about the political implications for the country's future now. So far, Prime Minister Miloš Vučević has resigned after documents about the investigation on the railway station collapse were published. So, how do you see the situation moving forward?
So, thinking about this, I think I ended up thinking about the situation in Macedonia in 2016 and 2017. It was a little bit similar, but I think different scale and scope. So the protesters, which was a combination of civil society, universities, students, and also elements of the opposition, were out in the street for days and days and days and months, I think, with demands to get rid of the ruling power, which was led by Gruevski from Vemero. He then ended up in Hungary. But anyhow, I think, European Parliament, for example, took a lot of initiatives to start some sort of a dialogue. They facilitated these dialogues. So I think in the case of Serbia, we need something like this, a dialogue facilitator coming from a trusted party. Okay, let's say, some of the European institutions have not been seen as a very trusted partners by many in Serbia and in the region, because they have been seen as appeasing Vučić for geopolitical reasons, the war in Ukraine, him sending weapons to Ukraine, although he didn't actually send them, he sold to the third party. Anyhow, so he has this argument saying to the Europeans and to the Westerners, look, I'm doing everything I can to help you. And so these partners are not seen as very trustworthy to facilitate this kind of a dialogue.
But so then what are the different options available?
There is different organizations, renowned organizations, who could step in and mediate, in a way, this type of a dialogue. But parties have to be convinced that the process will work. And when I say parties, one of the major parties here is the protesters. So if there's no confidence in them that this is going to work and their demands will be met, I don't think it's going to work. And then how do you do this with someone who has been leading Serbia in a very strange way for many years, which is the ruling party right now, led by Vučić. He's not the member of the party, but he's the head of the party.
It's interesting that you point out the possible role that Brussels could play in de-escalating things. Yet, the relationship between the EU and Serbia is, let's say, cold at best, right? The country has been up for candidate status to the EU accession since 2012, and you've written extensively about it and how Serbia-Kosovo relations hindered that very process. So I'm wondering, just taking a step back, is this domestic crisis impacting the accession process even further?
Absolutely, because as of late last year, under the Hungarian presidency, there has been a lot of talk that Serbia need to be, supported in its path to EU accession, and one of the clusters should be open finally, which is, talk about opening Cluster 3. But, there are many member states who are not going to go ahead with supporting this if there are no notable reforms in Serbia. And these reforms concern rule of law reform, freedom of media, of course, and accountability in the Banjska case.
The Banjska case, what is that case about?
The Banjska case is an attack by Serbian militia in the north of Kosovo in September of 23, I think it was. So I don't see Vučić being able to deliver on these demands, to be able to move ahead in the EU accession process anytime soon. Even if he if he says he's willing to do it, you need a lot of time for these things to be done in a convincing way. You can't say, I will fix rule of law, and then a week later it's fixed. And accountability on Banjska case, it's going to be very difficult because of all sorts of, entanglements of Serbian institutions, whether they were directly involved or they were in the knowledge of it. We don't know all these things because they never became public. But it's going to be very difficult to meet these demands in the near future and satisfy the protesters in a way that they will be convinced that it's going to work this time. Of course, this is hampering Serbia's EU accession path big time, which is one of the downfalls, not only for the Serbia, but for the region as well, considering the current geopolitical context Europe finds itself in, and also the election result in the US. We don't know what Trump is going to do. And if we were to draw from previous experience from Trump administration one, it doesn't look very good. It actually looks frightening for the region, for Serbia.
Yeah.
But let's see. These are all ifs.
Yeah. I guess we'll have to see whether Vučić manages to meet the protesters' demands. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome, and good luck with everything.
This was Euractiv's podcast, Today in the EU. Sound design by Miriam Sáenz de Tejada, research and production by Charles Cohen. Visit Euractiv to stay on top of the latest news and sign up for our newsletters. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and your favorite streaming platforms. Don't forget to subscribe and give us a review. It will really help us spread the word about our work. See you tomorrow. As part of our commitment to accuracy, inclusion, and transparency, Euractiv is part of the Trust Project.